Hi, welcome to Think Tech. We are raising public awareness about technology, energy, diversity, and globalism. This show is Center Stage. I'm your host, Donna Blanchard, proud managing director of Kumukuhua Theater, and we are coming to you live from Pioneer Plaza in the heart of downtown Honolulu, very near Kumukuhua Theater. I am really excited to tell you that today I am interviewing a fellow by the name of Owen Martel, and we just had to spend a little bit of time coming up with what title we were going to give him because his work is, we're calling him videographer. He has trekked across the country twice, and he is working on a documentary film about the people that he has met along the way and the things that have happened to him. So let's get to Owen Martel. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hi, yeah, I'm really fascinated by what you have done. And you sent out a little teaser video, sent a teaser video to me yesterday. I posted it on my Facebook page if anyone's looking, Donna.Blanchard. And what I was floored immediately by was the day you decided, okay, I'm gonna go do this, you hit your head, your cart broke, you know, already right from the get-go, you were having all of these problems and you just said, I'm doing it anyway, we're off.
One of the interesting things, I guess, about starting a big journey is there are several dates usually that you could pinpoint as the day where it started. I think a lot of big undertakings might have that kind of a shape to them. In my case, the trip that you're talking about, walking across the American West from Seattle to New Orleans, I started that in August of 2013. And before that, I'd had almost a year of fairly intensive planning, of seeing what all of my route options were for how to get across the Rocky Mountains, how to get across the desert Southwest, in terms of equipment, what I would need to support myself through stretches of potentially a week at a time between towns and some pretty remote areas. Trying to figure out how I was going to financially support the whole undertaking, trying to figure out what my main thematic concerns were, trying to work out who I might be able to interview or meet up with along the way. And then before that, I actually had a previous 4,000-mile walk across Europe. So this jump-off point that you're talking about when I first thought, right, this is the day that I leave Seattle, was preceded by initially months and then years of gearing up either mentally or equipment-wise or physically in training to make that move. And then as soon as things go wrong, you immediately start having to readjust, make compromises, recalibrate, rethink, adjust your expectations. And over the course of the trip, there were many points at which I then had to, for reasons of weather or available time, decide whether the project that I began thinking I was working on was even going to be the project I finished with, whether I was having the opportunity to expand it or was needing to really curtail my aspirations in some way or other. It's a never-ending process on a trip like this.
Yeah. You know, it's admirable on many levels. First of all, you decided to do this project. No one said, hey, Owen, do this and we'll pay you. No, nothing like that.
Right.
And there was no, oh, if you do this, blah happens, you know. No, this is all, you just drove yourself to do all of this and worked out all of those little details. Like, I really want to know where you got the juice for the camera for the whole thing, you know, all of those little details that went into it. And you're still working on the editing of it. You said the editing is taking longer than the actual trek. And we're going to talk about all of this, but you know, there are wild animals out there in this country. The people sometimes here in Hawaii, people forget there are things that want to kill you. There are bears and cats and snakes and all sorts of things that if you accidentally stumble upon them, they wouldn't.
Nothing so dangerous as the average driver, though.
Oh, so, well, and the average driver, you had some. You were on roads for part of the time.
By necessity, really. So when I walked across Europe, I pretty much stuck to really lonely, quiet back roads or trails, or even went cross country in a few stretches. When I tried to go across the American West, I found that virtually the entire western half of the United States is fenced off in parcels that are just impossible to get around unless you're on fairly major highways. It's not necessarily that the road has a lot of lanes, but there are only so many roads that go across the American West through the central parts of the deserts and the mountains. So you're sharing even a 2-lane road with heavy agricultural equipment on flatbed trucks, logging trucks, oil tankers. It's really something to be, say, a matter of just a foot away from a semi that's going by at 60 miles an hour. The slipstream just shakes you and can knock you over.
Oh, wow.
It's more impressive than running into any wild mammal. There's no animal that has quite that magnitude. It sort of takes the place almost. If you imagine what maybe for the pioneers it was like to run into a grizzly bear, that's kind of the feeling you get when you're staring down the barrel of a semi, basically.
Okay. It's got to be a little more predictable, though.
You never really know. Partially because many drivers of the big trucks, they're professionally obliged to be really conscientious, and they also have a fellow feeling, I think, a lot of time for other people who spend a lot of time out on the road in one way or another. It was pretty clear just from the places that I was in, the speed at which I was moving. Anyone who went past me could tell I'd been out there for a while. I couldn't have just shown up the day before. And the other thing is that aside from not knowing exactly how a driver is going to react to seeing you, you have very little control over what the force of the slipstream will do to you. Often, when a really big vehicle goes by fast, I would just sort of crouch down and try to brace myself, because sometimes you don't feel a thing, and other times you are actually knocked over. Wow. And sometimes you're sucked into the lane. It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of thing people usually think of when think of a grand walk into the wilderness, but I guess I found that the United States is a very heavily frequented, trafficked, built-up place.
Yeah. There's not a lot of room for people walking across the country.
There's a lot of wide open space, but it's all behind barbed wire.
Interesting. And you did a nice job editing the piece that you sent yesterday. I think really gave me the feeling of, holy Toledo, there he goes. He's doing it when you have yourself bringing your wagon down the stairs at your house. Here, I'm going, I'm doing it. I'm really doing this, and taking a deep breath. And
yeah.
How many miles on average did you get through a day?
Yeah, so the trip as a whole, I think, was somewhere around 17 miles a day average. But that's if you take the total distance of the trip, which was pretty much 4,000 miles on the dot, and then divide it by the total number of days it took. The thing is that total number of days included a lot of days off, where I was holed up somewhere in some town or some city, either repairing my equipment, replacing my equipment, gathering new supplies, planning new variations on the route, interviewing people, staying with friends. It also includes a lot of days that for one reason or another weren't full days walking. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes I just had to call it quits for some reason well earlier in the day than I expected to. So while the average was somewhere around 17 miles a day, the average actual full day walking was more like a marathon. There's just a lot of days off interspersed among them.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of walking.
I think...
Dang, that's a lot of walking.
It's a lot of walking, and the weird thing about it is that despite being sort of a plod, you're always in a hurry. Because I was trying to constantly keep ahead of the weather. I was trying to stick to a schedule that I was getting further and further behind, and then toward the end of the trip, I got fixated on the idea of reaching New Orleans in time for Mardi Gras. Because the trip as a whole had been grueling, and I wanted to finish with some sense of a party. And nobody was going to throw me a party, so I just had to find a party that was in progress and crash it. And nobody minds if you crash Mardi Gras, that's the whole point.
That's the point.
So there was this never-ending sense of rush and hurry and always being behind and having to make up distance, even though I was moving at this very, very tedious 3 miles an hour the entire time. And when you're talking about, say, a 30-mile day, that's a good 9 to 5 kind of thing. And for me, once I start going above 30 miles in a day, it's really hard to do another one the next day, and then another one the day immediately following. Your body never recovers. And psychologically coping with that was a novel experience. Even on my previous walk across Europe, that was as long. It even took longer to do. But the experience was not as grinding as the walk across the West was, just because toward the end the days got to be so repetitively long. A 40-mile day, a 30-mile day, a 40-mile day, a 35-mile day. By the end of a few days like that, you sort of lose track of your past and your future. You're just living in the moment. You're walking as fast as you can all day across the Great Plains at that point. So the landscape was also very uniform for days and days at a time.
Yeah.
Just juniper bushes as far as the eye can see in every direction.
like to run into a bear at that point, just to have something
Yeah,
to shake things
I did run into a bear in Idaho. Yeah, just one bear. I expected there would be more. I was really looking forward to it. I've run into a bunch of bears on previous trips and other places. And particularly this was crossing from Oregon into Idaho through Hell's Canyon. And people had been gleefully warning me that I was going to run into bears. Watch out, you're going to run into a bear. Do you have a gun? If you hear a bear, just like scream, we're right down the canyon, we'll hear you, we'll come running, we've got guns. Do you have a gun? You might run into a bear. And then I ran into one bear and it was terrified of me. It just took off as fast as it possibly could going up a highway.
Because he probably thought you had a gun.
Well, it was, it was the bear and me on the highway along with a bunch of four-wheel drives pulling speedboats up out of the reservoirs on the Snake River.
Oh.
So it was kind of like you and me both, bear. This is a nerve-wracking stretch of road.
Okay, I have so many thoughts going through my head right now. Let's go back to the very beginning, and then we're going to get into our first break. But
Sure.
I'd like to know, you did this first across Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
That was for the pure adventure of it. So after I got out of college, I wound up moving to Seattle, and I lived there for about a year and a half, and that was in 2010. So the economy had gone way downhill just when I was graduating, and I didn't have a previous sort of foundation or network really to be part of in Seattle. And after a year and a half of living in really suboptimal situations and not eating particularly well and being pretty unhappy most of the time, I thought, this is not what I want my future to go on like indefinitely. I needed to shake things up. And so long as I'm sort of operating on my own, I might as well do something that I could really only ever do on my own. And that was go walk across the continent. I wanted to have a great journey. I was coming back from a fairly substantial knee injury, and I'd recovered from that, and I thought I should take this good fortune and do something with it. Europe is the easiest continent to walk across for a beginner. It doesn't have a desert right in the middle of it. Every other continent pretty much does. And it's really, really densely populated. It's full of interesting cultural artifacts and traditions in every corner. So I basically got in a plane, went to Turkey, walked across Europe, and it was the best year of my life. And I wanted to follow it up with a chapter 2. But this time I wanted to have more of a side project to complement the physical side of the journey. I wanted to have something that I could be thinking about and working on with people while traveling. Because in Europe I'd met tons of interesting people but couldn't really share their stories comfortably from my point of view because they were often very personal and they were just conversational.
Was that documented, though?
Yeah, I took a lot of notes and recorded a lot of video, but because there wasn't a strong theme from the beginning and the people I was talking didn't think they were talking to a reporter, so to speak, I didn't feel comfortable making a big show out of their stories. I did want to have more to say, though, than just I went for a long walk and I had experiences. I suffered things. I achieved things. It just got a little tiresome telling the story of the people as though there were just one character in it. So when I walked across the West, I wanted to broaden the scope of the stories that I was working with as much as I could within a context that was really unique to the West, to the place I was traveling through. I wanted to find out what were quintessentially Western stories, and I wound up deciding that a lot of them had to do with transportation and telecommunication networks and the people who make all those things work for the rest of us. Essentially, I walked, and while I was walking, I talked to the people who make it possible for other people to get across the West without walking.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And we have to take a break right now. We're going to come right back. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so we're going to take a short break. This is Center Stage on the Think Tech Hawaii Digital Network, and we'll see you in about 45 seconds.
Aloha, how you doing? Welcome to Hibachi Talk. Gordo the Texar here. We're here every Friday from 1 o'clock till about 1:45, and we talk tech with many, many great guests. I got Andrew, the security guy who helps me co-host, and I got Papi Chulo who comes in once in a while to help us through the show. So please come join Hibachi Talk every Friday. Angus will be here too. So remember, like we say at the end of every show, how you doing?
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space, And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Aloha, this is Maria Mera, and I'm here to invite you to my bilingual show, Viva Hawaii on Think Tech Hawaii, every other Monday at 3 p.m. We're here to inform, motivate, and entertain you. Join us. Hola, soy Maria Mera y estoy aquí para invitaros a mi show bilingüe Viva Hawaii en Think Tech Hawaii cada 2 lunes a las 3 de la tarde. Estamos aquí para informaros, motivaros y entreteneros. Apuntaros.
Hi, we're back on Center Stage. We're talking with Owen Martel, who is a videographer, a documentarian, and a walker. I want to let you know that if you would ever like to join us in our studio here in Pioneer Plaza, you may do that. Just email Jay, that's Jay, at thinktechhawaii.com, and he will hook you up. What were you just saying about your shoes?
Shoes. Well, we were just talking during the break about gear and the kind of equipment that I wound up needing. And I was saying actually the shoes that I'm wearing now are just another pair of the same shoes I use for most of the trip.
And there are really no frills. Are you flexible enough?
Well, I can just take the shoe off entirely. That might make it easier.
Never had anyone. Oh, we got a picture.
Oh, really?
Of your shoes. Here's the actual thing too.
Yeah. So they're sort of like a super flexible office shoes.
Oh, wow.
They're just really bendy. And what was nice about them, I guess, is when you're walking 4,000 miles, you really don't want to have a lot of weight on your feet, because that's weight that you're picking up and moving and putting down and picking up with every step. But they really don't insulate very well. And my trip was originally supposed to end around early December. Instead, it wound up going right through the winter into spring. So around halfway through the trip, I needed to start wearing boots to keep my feet from freezing. I went over the Continental Divide in the Rockies, in the snow and ice, and then later on in the trip, going through some of the desert areas of New Mexico and then West Texas, there's just a lot of spiny plant life. And I wound up spiking my left foot on an acacia thorn because I was wearing these super thin, lightweight shoes. And one of the thorns just went right through and right into my foot and put me in a hospital. So this is one of these things where a piece of gear that served you really well for months and months and thousands of miles can then let you down really unexpectedly in a really inopportune moment. So that was interesting. I had a similar sort of series of experiences with the hand carts that I was using.
Wait, can I back you up for just a moment?
Sure.
So you stepped on this acacia thorn. This is a very painful thing.
Yeah.
How far did you have to walk to get help?
Well, so what had happened was I was in the oil and gas country in West Texas, and I was actually, just as it happened, in the middle of the least densely populated county in the 48 contiguous states. It's a great place to get injured. And on the sides of these highways, they use these big boomed mowing machines to keep the side of the highway clear. And the machines chew up the acacia bushes and just scatter the thorns all over the place, all along the side of the road. And they're, thorns are about yay big. So I'd gotten all this way without stepping on one and just figured, well, that must mean that I'm not going to step on one until I did. This was kind of early evening, and it was when there was a shift change going on a lot of the drilling rigs. So there were people driving past me toward the nearest town, offering me rides. And up until this point, I hadn't had to take a ride, and the whole point was to walk every step of the way across the West. So I figured while I can still hobble along, I might as well just hobble the next 30 miles into town, because why not, right? Then in the middle of the night, I set up my tent behind some bushes out in the desert and woke up in the middle of the night, and my foot was swelling badly. It was really stiff. It hurt a lot. I couldn't get it back into my shoe very easily. And I started to think, okay, well, I've got a fairly deep puncture wound right through the ball joint of my toe. It's a dirty puncture because it was just a thorn that was lying on the ground. And I'd had a tetanus shot, fortunately, at the start of the trip, but it seemed like there was a really high likelihood for it to get infected. And it was progressing badly enough, fast enough, that I realized I needed to get to town faster than next night. So it was dark at this point. It was below freezing. I packed up all my stuff, got back on the highway, but at this point it was
Nobody
deserted.
was around.
Right. There were some tankers going by, but I didn't have a flashlight at this point because through another bad series of events, I'd lost my flashlight about a week earlier. So I was sort of hobbling down the side of this highway in the middle of the desert in Texas with no light, And if a truck driver saw me, it would have been just for the blink of an eye. And they would have just seen this sort of ghostly figure flicker in their headlights, and there'd be no reason to stop, really. Also, the cart was a problem. I had all of my belongings in this hand cart. It was a converted bicycle trailer. So I realized that even if a tanker stopped for me, I couldn't exactly haul my stuff into the cab with me. I'd just have to abandon it on the side of the road. It was all of my possessions at that point. And what finally happened was that after about an hour of hobbling along in the dark like that, a drilling consultant in a pickup stopped for me, loaded stuff into the back of the pickup, and he drove me all the way to town and dropped me at the ER. So that's good Samaritanism at its finest, as far as I'm concerned. And then after recovering from the injury, I caught another ride northbound to the spot on the highway where I'd gotten picked up before and resumed the walk from the exact place. So I at least didn't skip any of the ground.
You maintained your integrity.
I did my best, yeah.
Okay, where were you going with the cart? You were going to say
The cart.
something about that.
So my original thinking was when I walked across Europe, I just carried a backpack. And this allowed me to go over the Alps and into the Scottish Highlands, into all these places where it would be really hard to go if you weren't carrying everything on your back. But the downside of that was that the toll on my body was intense. It took me 2 months or so after the Europe walk to just get over the feeling of being worn down. My feet, knees, ankles, back, everything was just compressed. So going into the West, I thought, not only do I not want to have that experience again, but I need to make sure I can carry enough water to get through a week in the desert, if that's what happens. And water weighs 8 pounds a gallon. You need about 2 gallons a day, and suddenly you're looking at well over the amount of weight that you could reasonably carry on your back. So it needs to go into some sort of surrogate, like a pack animal. I didn't want to do the trip with a pack animal because then you have to take care of the mule or the horse, and that's a full-time job unto itself. And I knew that historically, things like the Mormon emigration into the Salt Lake area, they used hand carts, big sort of almost like enormous wheelbarrows or small versions of Conestoga wagons that people could lug around. And I figured the contemporary version of that would be something either like a deer hunting cart, which tends to be like a lightweight steel or aluminum tubular frame with 1 or 2 wheels, small bicycle wheels sometimes, mounted so that a person can actually maneuver a fairly heavy load over uneven ground, or something like a child bike trailer, something that can take about the weight of a person and that one person can easily manage on foot. So over the course of the trip, I went through 2 completely distinct trailer bodies and a whole bunch of variations on wheels because I kept breaking bearings and bending axles. It was sort of like, are you familiar with the Oregon Trail computer game? That was a big thing when I was a grade school student, just first learning about U.S. history and how people traveled around the country. And there was this thing, your wagon wheel has broken. It's one of these dire things that can befall a traveler out in the plains or in the deserts. And I had that happen over and over and over again, so it felt very authentic.
Zuri just told me in that game everyone dies. But you played that game and you went ahead and,
right.
I'm going to do this anyway.
Yeah, I didn't get typhoid. That's the other thing that happens to everybody. You get typhoid and you die, so
well,
lucky me.
There you go. You didn't have that. You got an acacia needle at the ball of your foot.
Yep.
Okay, so what did you have on that cart? How many gallons of water were you carrying?
It varied tremendously and not always very wisely. It turned out that I really didn't ever need as much water as I thought I would, partially because some of the places I was hoping to go turned out to be off limits to me for one reason or another. The big one there was I was originally hoping to get to the Grand Canyon. But from the direction I was coming at it from, I would have had to go right across the Navajo Nation, and I never could work out permission for that. I tried, but it just wasn't going to happen. So as a result of that, my distance between towns was never more than 2 or 3 days, if I remember right. So I still wouldn't have wanted to carry all that water on my back, but I didn't need to carry as much in the car as I thought. On the other hand, because my trip went into winter and then all the way through winter, I had to carry much more insulation than I ever expected to. Originally, I thought I wouldn't have to worry about temperatures getting that much below freezing, but instead, I think it was up around the Continental Divide, it just started to go deep below 0. And at that point, I was already using multiple jackets and 2 sleeping bags and blankets and anything to try to keep myself and my water and my electronics warm through the night.
Oh.
Because, I mean, if all of my water froze solid, how I was going to melt it again was kind of hard to figure out. A big volume of water that freezes solid overnight is not going to melt in a hurry, and then how do you keep from getting really dehydrated, even though it's freezing cold?
Yeah.
I was carrying cameras to do all of my interviews and to document the trip with. If those froze, I was not going to be able to afford to replace them, and even if I could easily buy the equipment again, how would I get it to myself in the middle of nowhere in the mountains? And then I was also worried about things like every morning when I woke up, because the morning is the coldest time, I'd be trying to break down my tent, and I couldn't do it with my gloves on because it was too cumbersome. So I had to spend about 2 hours every morning trying to get the feeling back into my hands. The staying warm was this obsession for months, and the cart, in consequence, filled up with fluffy stuff. All of these things that keep you warm are really high volume, low density. So I might have wanted to carry more food or more water or anything. I just didn't have room because it was full of blankets.
What kind of food did you take?
It actually largely wound up being whatever I could find in gas stations.
Oh,
Ah.
protein bars and Cheetos.
Not even the protein bars, just the Cheetos. Actually, no, the exciting part of the trip in food terms was just seeing what little regional variation there was in what kind of food you could get at convenience stores. Because a lot of the places I went through, and there was what, Idaho Falls. Idaho Falls, I stopped at a place that had a bulk aisle. There were a few other places in Idaho that had bulk food, so like around some
In
of
the
the ski
convenience
resorts.
store.
Supermarkets,
In the-
ski resort supermarkets.
Ah.
That was the peak of my gastronomic luxury. Everything else, it was lots of cheese. I find cheese is important for some reason because it tends to balance out my blood sugar, as far as I can tell. I don't know a lot about why that would be true scientifically or
Good
medically.
balance of protein and carbs.
It works really well for me. Lots of chocolate, which poses a major cavity hazard. It's hard to brush your teeth if your hands are never particularly clean. You don't really want to be sort of like putting your fingers in your mouth to be flossing. So if you're eating hundreds of grams of chocolate a day, that's like every meal gets washed down with an entire block of chocolate, just a brick, because the calorie density that you need is immense. And chocolate, cheese, that'll do it. For a while in New Mexico, I was finding that gas stations would bake their own tortillas every morning.
Oh.
So fresh baked gas station tortillas, that'll wrap up anything into a nice, can pretend that it's a crepe or a burrito, just whatever strikes your fancy there. But yeah, particularly as I got into Central Texas, it wound up kind of devolving into single serving snack packs, that type of things. Your fingers are always sort of dyed this fluorescent orange color, and
I would expect someone who's going on this trek to have, gorp at least, the healthiest balance of stuff.
Yeah.
And you were eating snack packs.
all that really matters is the overall calorie count and getting enough protein and fat at that point. Because I was ultimately eating, I think, more than 5,000 calories a day, which means that you're just always eating. It's not even meals anymore. You eat one thing and you find the next thing to start eating it, and by the time you finished it, you're looking for the next thing to eat. I never stopped to eat. You're just always eating while moving. I had a bag in front of me full of food that I would just grab out of and keep eating all day.
Because you needed it.
Never
You were
hungry,
burning
never
those.
full. Yeah, never gain weight, never lose weight. Because at that rate, that's 3 pounds of food a day, so if you don't eat enough in one day, you actually visibly get thinner, which is weird.
And real quick, we have to go to our second break. What kind of blankets? Wool? The wool variety, or did you go Gore-Tex?
No, actually, the blankets wouldn't have occurred to me before because I'm coming from a backpacking background. These were actually things people gave me who were worried about me. A few times on the trip, there were people who, say, knew that I was camping on the outskirts of town and came out to find me to give me a pair of socks or a blanket or a jacket. And
Nice.
yeah, that's a kind of charity you don't often find unless you're really in need. So I felt my need and I appreciated that other people were willing to help me.
That's very cool. Okay, we're going to take another break. We're going to come back and continue this fascinating story, and I can't wait until the movie comes out. You're watching Center Stage on the Think Tech Hawaii Digital Network, and we'll be right back.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. I am Anu Hittel, and I host a show on climate change. It's called Climate Change Beyond Outrage, and in it, we go beyond outrage to look at solutions to global climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. Join me every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. Aloha, namaskar, and goodbye.
Aloha, my name is Carl Campagna. I am the host of Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. You can see our show every Wednesday at noon at 12 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, as well as visiting YouTube and finding the link for the show there. The show is also aired on OC16. We look forward to seeing you on the show. We have many wonderful guests, including Joan Husted, Corey Rosenlee, where we talk about the very important issues of education for our keiki. We look forward to seeing you there. Mahalo.
Hi, you're back. We're back. You're back too. Center Stage on the Think Tech Hawaii Digital Network. We have a thing called Alexa here. And I don't want to say her name too loud because she is kind of uppity today. But when I asked her a question, I didn't get the right answer. I think the movie is called Craigslist Joe. And it's about a guy who goes across the country using only Craigslist to find jobs, places to stay, people to travel with him. He made money along the way. He brought with him, he started with a backpack and a bicycle and a cell phone. And you should watch that. It's actually good. It's very, it just gives you that happy, good feeling. There are really good people out there after all over the place.
This is something actually on a broader sort of abstract level that I am thinking about a lot as I'm trying to figure out how to tell stories about these trips that I've done. As you mentioned, right now I'm kind of nearing the end of more than 2 years of editing video footage of this last trip. And then I've also got enormous mountains of footage from the first trip across Europe that I haven't even dug into with this degree of intensity yet. And I'm always trying to figure out how to tell these stories insofar as I even have much in the way of flexibility in the material I present. I've only got so many shots from the camera, I've only got so many pages of notes in my journal to draw from at this point. What kind of stories people respond to? Because I've got such a range that I could present. There are the high moments, the low moments. There are the parts that are exhilarating, the parts that are sort of just drudgery in the extreme. That's in there too, and it would be weird not to include some of that, just to give a sense of what the real experience was like. But no one wants a story that's like that from beginning to end.
Right.
And I feel almost like there's kind of a wave over the last few years of stories of people going on long solo journeys. It seems like it's in the air. Whether that's big Hollywood movies, there was Wild got a lot of attention, both as a book and as a movie recently, and then things like this, sort of more indie productions, I gather. Trying to find a story that is true to my own actual experience that still sort of resembles the stories about trips and journeys and ordeals that people are familiar with is interesting. Everybody's got the sense of what a story about a journey should be like. And it's this kind of Joseph Campbell mythological basis to so much of how we think about stories at all. So you either leave home or a stranger comes to town. And on a trip like this, you're either constantly leaving home or you're constantly the stranger coming to town. So how do you present the story in a way people respond to?
It must give you, you said in the first segment something about you're just living in the moment. That really living in the moment for a year like that has to change who you are, don't you think?
It does. It changes you in the sense that when it's over, you're not the same person as when you started, but also while you're doing it, you're somebody who you might not recognize as yourself at other times. And one of the ways that definitely happened to me was you stop experiencing time on the same scale as other people. So before you go off on a trip like this, you have your friends, you have your family, coworkers. Then you depart and you go into this sort of permanent present while they move through time normally. And everything that happens to you seems to happen at just a different cadence. So while I was walking across Europe, I had a friend who had a child. And there were days on the walk across the West that seemed to take up experience other people would think should happen over months. You could go through these intense peaks and valleys of emotion that were just compressed by the intensity of the experience. You've got nothing to distract you. from what's going on in your head, except for really intense exigencies of the cold, the hunger, the anxiety. Where am I going to sleep? Are the police going to make me stop because I'm a hazard to myself in passing traffic? Is this injury going to clear itself up, or is it going to get worse? Will anyone care about this when this is over? What have I done? That whole kind of thing can go on just in the space of one day, and the person who you maybe talked to by phone the previous day thinks that you're fine, when really suddenly you've gone completely off the deep end. Or the person you talked to the next day by email thinks, my friend is out there and he's suffering, when really by this point you've just seen an amazing sunset, and you've seen a moose in the wild, or you've seen a flock of starlings going over the plains in Texas, and everything is actually perfectly good again. That's something that's hard to communicate at the time. It's also sort of weird to tell in a story.
Yeah.
Stories tend to unfold in a pretty linear fashion, and don't have these amazing sort of Slinky-esque expansions and contractions of your experience at the time. And I don't think I'm unique in feeling this way on the course of these long trips. I'm just, in some ways, surprised that I'm still as susceptible to that after having gone through months and months and months of it. It doesn't even out.
Yeah. Well, don't use the word susceptible. Make it open. You're still open to that after all of that. And the beauty of putting this into a film to tell the story is you can describe those Slinky-esque moments in ways that makes us feel it along with you. And I have confidence that you will, after just seeing the little piece that you sent yesterday, really. And I'll post that on with our the YouTube link for this, so people can look for that. What must your mom have thought? Was she like, are you crazy? No, don't do this? Or were your parents saying, go, son, fly and be free?
Well, they were supportive of my going to do it, but I don't think they thought it was a particularly good idea. So in that sense, I think I have the best of both worlds. Let's be optimistic about that. I have people close to me who are worried that I should do things right and be safe, but are also going to help me make the thing work.
Yeah.
On various levels. It's hard to do something like this if there's not somebody that you can call at the end of a bad day, week, month, whatever. And one of the things that I did find about the West is going off thinking I was going to this vast, open, empty space. With the exception of a few places where there's no cell reception, you're actually in pretty close touch with the rest of the world all the time. That actually made the experience of being out there in some ways weirder, because I could see through Facebook pictures all of my friends continuing to do things normally while I was in a tent with my foot injured or all the rest of it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. All right. So where'd you get the juice? By the way, you're talking about your cell phone.
Yeah.
I got to find this out, and I'm like counting down the minutes. I got to
Okay.
get everything I
I
can.
did have a spare battery. I did have a solar panel. Didn't really use that much though. I had spare batteries for all the recording devices, and those were usually good for a few days at a time. And then there was the gas station ritual. You see a gas station, you pull into the gas station, you immediately plug in all of your chargers into the one wall outlet into a sort of multiple port adapter. Then you run and you get usually a burrito. It's a terrible idea. The gas station burrito was never your friend, but it's all you can think of when you walk in, so you eat it and then you just save your regret for later. And then you get to work on the chocolate and chocolate substitute products.
Chocolate substitute.
Yeah.
Like carob?
Anything that's marketed as chocolate in a gas station probably has a very low cocoa content. But anyway, you get as much of that into as possible, then you go to the bathroom and you brush your teeth.
Oh,
And then you hit the road. So yeah, that just, every few days there's this gas station extravaganza. Yeah.
And so how long would you leave your stuff plugged in there? Because it takes a while to charge all that stuff up.
Yeah, maybe an hour or so, but that would be the highlight. That would be the highlight of that block of several days, was getting to sit down for a whole hour, as opposed to just walking from the moment you wake up until the moment you fall asleep.
How long was the space of time between the Europe trip and the America trip?
A year or two.
A year or two?
I sort of got everything revved up again as quickly as I could. And by this point, I'm actually feeling really It's not really cabin fever exactly, but it's been long enough that I've been doing something like this that I feel like I should be doing something like it again. I do miss it.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. You miss it. Well, the amount you took the most amazing, like there were vision quests, right? You didn't. You were still in touch with humanity, which so you weren't in the middle of a desert on peyote.
It was a beginner desert
That I know of.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a beginning desert, and you had lifelines
Yeah.
much more accessible. But when you get to spend that much time in your head, meeting new people, being present, being in your body, because you had to have been feeling your body much more so than we normally do in daily life.
It's a terrible thing.
To feel it. Well,
Yeah.
no, I
To
sit
just
at a
be-
desk
to
most
be,
of the
To
day.
be that closely aware of where all of your bones are. Like, you get to the point where you feel where every bone in your foot is all the time. It's weird. The main thing isn't so much the physical sensations, though. It's the overriding certainty of purpose. Where every morning you know you have to make that day's distance, and you know why. It's to get to the other side of the continent, and you're not going to stop. You're not going to stop for the weather or the injury or the exhaustion or the self-doubt or anything. You're going to do it. And that's something that is harder to achieve and sustain in normal daily life, for me at least. I really value the things in normal daily life that support that kind of intention. It's an unusually intense way of going about your daily life and doesn't fit well with being comfortable. So if you set yourself up a project where the comfort isn't the point and just the determination is, that can be really rewarding and fulfilling while you're doing it, even though it's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we set up so much of what we do in life to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Did you have any days where you thought, this is it, I can't do it anymore, I'm throwing in the towel?
No, because I said I would do it, so I needed to.
Dang. That's pretty intense. And I got that from you from the very beginning when you started off with a pretty bad cut on your head and your wheel falling off, and you weren't
Just
prepared.
how embarrassing would
No.
it be to quit on day one? But the thing is, then it just keeps going. How embarrassing would it be to quit on day 100? Because you didn't learn enough in the previous 100 days to handle whatever this latest problem was. How big a deal is it really? Because I'm following in this journey sort of through and across and in the footsteps of people like Lewis and Clark and the pioneers, and if they could do it, what excuse have I got?
They didn't have cell phones
Yeah.
and Facebook friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had Sacagawea.
Well, it's
They were
friends are
They
always
had
important.
other people.
Yeah.
There's a show on the History Channel now called Alone, which I'm a little bit obsessed with.
Mm.
But they take people and they toss them out into the wilderness with a limited amount of supplies that they have chosen in Canada, Alberta Island.
Mm.
And their purpose is just to outlast everyone else. But they do, and they're filming themselves through this. And one of the fellows said, they all got rather emotional, and they all talked about their feelings way more than men normally do. It was really refreshing. But the one guy said, you don't have anyone to hide your emotions from when you are this alone, so they just come pouring out. And I would imagine, especially if you're the sort of person who veils their emotions on a regular basis, it would be kind of mind-blowing, kind of shattering. Did you have anything like that?
The big emotional moments for me came in some ways at really unexpected or really expected moments. So for one of the really big expected moments was when I got to the Mississippi River. That was the end of the trip sort of geographically. I finished the thing in New Orleans, but when you get to the Mississippi, that's pretty much where people think the West stops, and from there I knew it was only a couple days to the end and I was gonna make it. So going across the river, I got all choked up. But the silly thing was, at the same time, I had to record that moment for the purposes of telling the story of the trip, and no one was going to record it for me, so I had to simultaneously have my earnest emotional meltdown and get it all in frame.
Nice.
That's not right. But then at the end of the trip, once it was over, there's the shock of the purpose being wrapped. And it was all the weirder, actually, to get there during Mardi Gras when everyone is celebrating and you're surrounded by thousands of strangers who don't see you. kind of. That was odd. And at that point, what I really would have liked to have, just been back with the people who matter most, and didn't see that coming. So that really threw me for a loop. I was sitting there listening to all this jazz music, which I don't normally respond emotionally to jazz. So at first I thought, I'm taking this music way too seriously.
Oh.
Then I realized it had nothing to do with the music at all.
Everything that you'd been through, you wrung out and filled up every day. I would imagine, in my head, that's what happens.
Yeah, a lot of the days are like that. But the other thing is, a lot of days are exhilarating just for how crazy they are. Like the day that I went up into the Tetons in the snow, it was a 36-mile day. I was just by myself up in the snow, and I was worried what happened if I run into a bear now, because it was peak foraging before hibernation season. And the national park had been closed by the government shutdown, so I wasn't going to run into any rangers or anybody else up in there. And on the way out, I just sort of started hallucinating a little, because I'd been post-holing in the snow all day, which is that's a long way to spend the day. And it was this just feeling of elation. It's just me and the stars and these enormous mountains. The world is completely open.
And
I can
the
just run with this
snow.
forever.
I'm so sorry, we've got to wrap. I can't wait to see the documentary. I would love to have you come back and talk some more, and I want to know where you're going to go next. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. There's a few people I'd like to thank in the studio. Our floor manager, Rich Prapus, who's right over there. Thank you. Zuri Bender, our studio overlord, who is also in my ear, and Jay Fidel, who somehow manages to put all of this together. Thanks, and we'll see you next week. Bye.